O.G. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about belonging again, section 34. We have discussed the conflict of society, which is where social responsibility comes in conflict with social responsibility. And it should be noted that as we approach a single global state, not that we necessarily have to reach it, but as we are toward it, say in globalization, neoliberalism, all that, the severity of conflict of society situations get worse because there is greater difference. There are more values that are trying to be recognized by the social processes, by the social systems. But all values are experienced as if they should just be, not that they should have to negotiate with other values. Otherwise, everyone must experience their values as the values, otherwise they would not practice them. Yeah, sure, when people are asked directly, they can talk about diversity, they can note that there's space for other values, but practically, people have to live as if their values are the values. And to the degree there's inherently a cognitive dissonance in allowing other values to exist in your society. That doesn't mean it's going to necessarily drive people to get upset or to do terrible things, but there's kind of an offness you have to get comfortable with if there are going to be other values in your society. And this gets into cognitive bargaining, which was discussed in the last sections, and all the stuff with Reif and Berger and Hunter, this tension. Society always is a tension. Now, again, when diversity is not radical, then if you're a Baptist and a Methodist as president, you may not like that, but it's not going to be intense, the cognitive bargaining with the social order. The cognitive bargaining that results between the personal, having to negotiate, having to make sacrifices, having to cognitively bargain with the social order is not going to be extreme, because both the Methodists and the Baptists share similar metaphysical and moral frameworks. But once diversity in the culture is extreme, once there are atheists, Hindus, Christians, Muslims, etc., in the same social order, and as differences in, say, Christianity fragment into greater and greater differences, then the cognitive bargaining between the personal beliefs and the social order become great. And as they become greater, they become more existentially destabilizing. As that occurs, totalitarianism becomes more appealing. And that is the whole problem that belonging again is exploring. Because this state of great existential anxiety is also one in which belonging becomes hard to find. It is critical to understand that, say, the value of justice phenomenologically and logically demands to just be, which is AA, not to be processed, as likewise demands for freedom, Jesus, equality, and what have you. All values have a scent of Eden in them, something Freudian, a desire of pure being. Values are inherently Edenic and wholesome, we could say. But as we've discussed throughout O.G. Rose, pure being is always an effacement. An effacement is distinct from a negation, as we find in Hegel. Well, this means that all values are naturally effacing, for all values want to just be, AA. And all social orders must manage this desire in values to efface themselves for quote-unquote good reason, and this is why we must deal with the conflict of society. How do we stop values from effacing themselves? Well, by forcing them to engage in processes they will naturally hate and want to destroy, which means society must set itself up then to be attacked, to take the bullet with which values are trying to shoot themselves, and this is us. So, we're discussing values again because the value circle is a critical component of the overall conflict of society. Values entail to be AA. AA is an effacement. That means values entail a death drive. We often talk about humans having a death drive and seeking AA, which is an effacement or pure being, when we're stuck in time and we're stuck in contingency and we're stuck in becoming. If you cannot escape becoming, then to seek being is to cease to be, is the great irony. And this great irony, this great tendency of self-effacement is inherent in values themselves. And it has to be. Values, in order to have authority, have to present themselves as the values. Otherwise, they just feel like preference and taste. And it's very difficult to hold a society together according to values that are mere taste. Values have to that feel like they have authority. But if values have authority to people, they will feel like they should not have to deal or bend to social processes. They feel like they should just be. If we take seriously this idea that values entail a desire to just be in a world of becoming, and we also take seriously the fact that humans ontologically do the same thing. There's an ontological natural desire to be in a world of becoming. as we actually are becomings, and this is discussed throughout Reconstructing A and Z, the Phenomenology, the Philosophy of Lack, and so on, well, then everything is pathological, just about. Society is pathological, values are pathological, people are pathological, everything has a pathological tendency to it, neuroses, all these different things. And that is something we have to learn to manage, which, when difference is not radical in a social order, we can practically exist as if it's not there, as if this inherent pathological tendency in everything isn't present. But as difference intensifies, well, the pathology of everything becomes more and more impossible to ignore. And that's our situation now. And as that pathology becomes more vivid to us, then the conflict of society becomes more intense, more inescapable, and more felt. Again, you could just stress that, well, haven't values always been finite? Haven't they always actually just been becomings, process, not really just beings? Yes, but in the past, if you could believe in a God, well, then you would have reason to understand why finite values were imperfect, because you weren't in God yet, but there was kind of a promise that you'd eventually get pure being. If you don't believe in God anymore, as collectively we don't tend to as much, well, then you're stuck living according to values that will never realize pure being and have no hope of aligning with pure being. So from what can they derive their legitimacy and their authority? Well, it doesn't seem like it can be from anywhere. And how do you live with this? How do you live with this fundamental lack that is below and part of being? Well, this would get into absolute knowing and becoming absolute knowers or delusion. But if only a minority of people can do that, well, then we have a problem. When religion wanes, values still seek transcendental grounding, but that option is no longer on the table. Thus, values realize their own groundlessness, and the value circle becomes visible and undeniable. Once this occurs, we either turn to a totalitarian dictator to hide the value circle from us, which is the realization that values are circular, you're always already in them, and therefore, and as a result, you can't be certain that they have transcendental grounding, and this is described in the last section in light of the hermeneutical circle. But this is a very difficult thing to accept, so once it becomes visible and vivid, we tend to turn to totalitarianism to escape it. Or we have to evolve into delusion individuals, which is the phrase I've used, because glimpsing the value circle is just too existentially overwhelming. And this is the situation we find ourselves in today. For more by O.G. Rose, please visit ogrose.com. The playlist is on YouTube for Belonging Again. You can find the list on Medium of all the sections. And thank you so much for your time.